Guys, I'm back. So I wanted to actually film a second video because it came across my mind as I was making the first video. Oh, she's tired. Hello. This is Daisy, my little Yorkie pup who really needs a haircut. um, so I wanted to make a video, a second video, talking about why it's such a bad idea um, to go back to your abuser, to go back to an abusive relationship. So one thing to take into account, which is true for a lot of us, unfortunately, is that oftentimes when you do leave an abusive relationship, it usually is a process. And so it's not, the ideal way to leave an abusive relationship is to have it be a one and done kind of thing. Just rip the Band-Aid off and be done with it. That is actually the safest way to leave an abusive relationship. But it doesn't, to be completely honest and realistic about it, it doesn't usually happen that way. It usually is a process. And so I think that that's why I wanted to make this video, is because if we can avoid going back to an abuser, that is the ideal way to get away, to make your exit. So she wants to get down. Hang on one second. There you go. So the biggest reason as to why it's such a bad idea to go back to an abusive relationship is because it demonstrates and reinforces weak boundaries. So, for example, if you go to your abuser and say, hey, I'm done with this relationship. I don't like the way that you treat me. I find you to be abusive. I'm out. I'm done. Like, this is over. And then, a month or two later or whatever amount of time goes by, and you start to, feel that trauma bond kick in, where you really start to where you start to sort of go through like withdrawal, a lot, even in normal breakups, right? Sometimes when we break up with somebody that we still love or care about, we oftentimes sort of go through a withdrawal period where it's very painful. It can be almost like, you almost can get sort of like addicted to the other person. And so it can feel very emotionally and sometimes physically painful to leave, to break up with somebody. And I think that's even worse when it's somebody who's abusive, that's especially true if there's a trauma bond there. So if you break up with the abuser and you go back and think, maybe we can work this out. I really miss that person. I feel like I can't live without them, despite how they treated me, despite the abuse. And you go back, you're now telling your abuser that you didn't mean what you said. Okay, so that whole conversation that you may have had with them about, I'm done. I don't like the way that you're treating me. I'm not standing for this. All that goes out the window, including I love myself enough to get out of this situation. That all goes out the window when you go back. And so you're basically, you hear people say you teach people how to treat you. And so unfortunately, when you go back to an abuser, you are teaching your abuser and basically giving them permission to continue the abuse. Now, you may jump back into that relationship and try to work it out. Now, we all know what's going to happen because nobody can, I feel it's humanly impossible to withstand abuse. I mean, you're just going to be miserable, and it's just so unhealthy. If you go back into that relationship and you try to work things out, chances are you're going to realize again, you're just going to go back in that circle where you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this. It's too much. It's just this like constant, repetitive, abusive cycle. And you will just get back to that point where you realize how incredibly miserable you are, how incredibly unhealthy the whole situation is, and you will want to get out again. And you'll have that same conversation with the abuser again. I can't do this. This is very painful. You're not treating me well, in hopes that they will change. The problem is these people don't generally change. And so, so then you leave the relationship again after you've had the second conversation about why their behavior is bad. And this time, because of the fact that you came back before, they now are learning that you don't mean what you say, because you said that you already had this conversation with them before and then you came back. So now, even though you're staying away and maybe you actually mean it this time, the abuser no longer recognizes, not that they ever really recognized boundaries, but now they really don't recognize your boundary because you have taught them that you don't mean what you say. So this can lead into things like, the abuser could start stalking you because they're not respecting or recognizing boundaries. They don't believe that you mean what you say. I know this sounds really messed up, but there have been situations where, a restraining order has been put out on the abusive partner, and the person that filed the restraining order, the victim, will then come back to the abuser despite having that restraining order out. I mean, it can get really intense and really just crazy, but I think that just demonstrates how incredibly deep that trauma bond can be for some people. And it can get really, really dangerous. All the forms of abuse are horrible. And I certainly, my heart goes out to anyone who's actually experiencing that. But the reality is the physical abuse is actually, from a physical standpoint, more dangerous, I think, than the emotional mental abuse. Not from, I don't know how to say that. Like, I understand all the forms of abuse, and so I'm not taking away from how awful any of them, these forms of abuse, can be, and how painful they are, and how, like, they can literally, you feel like you're losing your soul when you're going through any of these forms of abuse. But the physical abuse, the abusers that are actively physically abusive, I mean, if you are showing them such weak boundaries, I mean, these are the situations, I think, that tend to end up in, unfortunately, the victim losing their life because they're just, and of course not in all cases. This is not like a blanket general statement, but it has I think it has more of a chance to go in that direction, and that's really, really scary. And so you have to really understand how dangerous these situations can be, Because I think the reality is, like, there's just so many types of abusers, and some of them are so charming, and you are completely like feel like you've had the rug ripped from underneath you when you discover who these people really are. And it just goes to show how incredibly deceitful they can be, and how good at being charming, and like having a completely, when I go like this, I mean like a mask that's like, it's like two completely different people. And so my point in that is that you never really know who you're dealing with, unless you've been with this person long enough. But even then, like, how many times do you turn on the news and people are shocked, by someone who went on a killing rampage, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, oh, that I'm so shocked. That person was, they were so great and well known, amongst the community, et cetera, et cetera. So it's always really a good idea to proceed with extreme caution when you're dealing with an abuser, because you just never 100% know who you're dealing with. And so it's such a difficult situation, because for somebody who's in an abusive relationship that's dealing with a trauma bond, it can be so, like, the only way sometimes that they feel that they can actually get out of that relationship is by doing it in increments, like having it be a process. The problem is it's so incredibly dangerous. But if that's the only way that you feel you can make it out, then that's what you need to do. If the only way you feel you can make it out is by having it be a process, because you just cannot mentally and emotionally fathom doing it any other way, or like just having it be like cut and dry done, it's better that you get out at some point, or that you have a chance to get out at some point, even if it takes you 5 or 6 times to leave, than never getting out at all. Do you know what I'm saying? But understand the danger behind not leaving the first time and truly being done. You are literally potentially putting yourself in serious danger, because a lot of times these people are very unpredictable. You don't know how far they're willing to go. Domestic violence calls with the police are actually the most dangerous calls that police get. So, that should just be an indicator right there to you as to how dangerous abusive relationships are. And that's just for the police, never mind for the person who's actually being abused. Because emotions are generally running high. And a lot of times abusers, they have like control issues, and they don't want to feel out of control. They will do anything to sort of be able to regain control in the situation. You look at like people like that are rapists, it's very rarely ever about the sex. It is purely about bringing that person under control. So, if you or a friend or someone that you know is, in having the misfortune of going through an abusive situation, it's really important that you understand, or that they understand how important it is really to leave when you say you are going to leave. Mean what you say, and just be done. And block the contact if you can. I understand it's difficult and not always possible if there are children involved, which is, I know that happens where there are kids involved and you cannot completely cut off contact always. But I think in those situations, only having the absolute necessary contact. The children's situation is so much more complicated, and I can't quite speak on that, from experience, and my knowledge in terms of how to manage abusive relationships when children are involved is very limited. So I don't think it would be fair for me to talk on that as much. I don't think that I would have much helpful advice other than, maybe seeing if you can get a lawyer involved, maybe seeing, I don't know, maybe potentially getting like some sort of mediation involved. Obviously if the other parent is dangerous, and then, maybe they could help sort of litigate that situation. But, you definitely want to be mindful about following through with what you say and having those strong boundaries. I can't stress that enough. And I think I just wanted to sort of touch on that. The weak boundaries is basically what got you into that abusive relationship in the first place. And so or what kept you in that relationship. So if you go back, when you say you're done, you are basically reinforcing those weak boundaries again. And so, you should really try not to do that. And the best thing for you is to walk away and truly, truly be done. That is the absolute best thing that you can do. The most loving thing you can do for yourself is protecting your own emotional, mental, physical well-being and truly being done. So I hope that this video is helpful for somebody out there, and I hope that you're I guess I'm wondering, thinking about who might be watching these videos. And so the reality is it might be somebody who is currently going in an abusive relationship or has been. And so I hope that if you are in an abusive relationship currently, that this video has given you some helpful advice. And I want you to know that if you are trying to get out, I just want to give you send you a virtual hug and encourage you to be strong, not to be afraid, to embrace the people around you who are trying to be there for you, to help you to help you out of that relationship, and take control of your life, take control of your situation. You can get yourself out. And, we are stronger than we think we are. And we are resilient. And I think that, that's one of the things that we learn when we go through situations like this, or any challenge in life, is no matter how painful they are, we learn through that experience how resilient we are and how we are able to be survivors of bad situations. And those situations, those challenges in life, allow us to grow and allow us to have compassion and empathy for others that are going through similar types of situations. And hopefully when we get out onto the other side, we're able to give something back to that community of people that maybe went through something similar as yourself, and that we're able to contribute something to that community to help them understand and know their strength, and show them that you can make it out, with some determination, with self-love, with flipping the script, taking control of your own life, taking control of your situation, and stop allowing yourself to be the victim. You know, a lot of times when we are the victim of abuse, it almost sort of like, while we are the victim, we almost sort of get brainwashed to believe that is all we are. We are a victim, and so we start to see ourselves as the victim in every situation. And it's important, I think, to not get lost in that victim mindset and to look at yourself and start to take some accountability for where you are in life, to take some accountability for what landed you in an abusive relationship. You do have to take some responsibility for why you landed in that relationship, why you stayed. And you have to look at yourself. You really do. Because if you don't look at yourself, you will find yourself continuously in those types of relationships where you are the victim. And so the only way I feel like to get out of that is to stop looking at yourself as the victim, even though you may truly be the victim. I'm not taking that from anybody. But you have to be able to flip the script so that you can actually stop being the victim. And that happens by taking control of the situation, by putting your foot down and showing strong boundaries, actually having strong boundaries, and showing yourself love and putting yourself first. So I hope that those words are encouraging to people that are going through this type of relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or family, because that happens too. And just know that you can survive it. You can get out, and you don't have to be that person. You don't have to be the victim. And you can teach the world what you are willing to put up with and what you're not willing to put up with. And no one should ever be putting up with abuse. I think I'll leave this video here. Thanks for joining.